And we'll give it one more minute and then start.
Sure, yeah, that sounds good.
All right, I think we're good to go. So, welcome everyone again. Good evening, good morning. For those of you who have attended our sessions in the past, welcome back. Those of you who are joining us for the first time, Spark is a mentoring initiative that aims to help undergraduate and graduate students, as well as working professionals in the education and mentoring space by providing resources on career guidance, further studies, and several other peripheral skills development. So you can check out our website for more information. And next slide, please. And just before we move forward, I want to spend a minute to talk about our program. So moving forward, everything that we offer at Spark will be bucketed into one of these six programs. So the Achieve program will focus on professional and peripheral skills development. So today's session is a part of the Achieve program. The Inspire program will focus on career guidance series. We have four more programs. Empower is going to focus on communication skills development or English language development. Engage is a program that focuses on one-on-one mentorship. uh, Kindle will feature short courses on a diverse range of topics. And lastly, Innovate will focus on workshops geared towards scientific and technical training. So you can go to the website and find out more about each of these programs in detail and give us feedback. So yeah, with that, let's get started with our session, which is on how to prepare for job interviews. So today we have with us Akshat and Suchitra. Akshat graduated from ICT in 2014 with his bachelor's in chemical engineering degree. And he then got his PhD from RPI in New York. He currently works as a purification development scientist at Sanofi. Suchitra graduated from ICT with her BTech in textile technology in 2010. She then got her MBA from NMIMS in Bombay in HR and has worked in that space since. She currently works as a talent acquisition manager at Agoda in Bangkok. So, when I was actually interviewing for jobs about 2 years ago, Akshat was the one who guided me with the extensive research he had done on this topic at that time, and that was immensely helpful to me. And as for Suchitra, she does this for a living and is someone from the other side. So we are really excited for the both of you to speak on this topic. Now, before we get started, one last thing. If you haven't attended our sessions before, we will be using Pigeonhole to take questions. So the way this works is you can use the barcode that is flashing on your screen, or you can go to www.pigeonhole.at, enter the passcode 15 May 21, and you can drop in your questions either during the session as they come to your mind or after. So we will have a Q&A session at the end of the talk. You can also like questions posted by other people, and we encourage you to take a quick look at the questions already posted so that you're not duplicating questions with a similar theme. So yeah, with that, I'll hand it over to Akshat and Suchitra.
All right. Good morning, good evening, everyone. Really nice to be here. And thank you, Amar and Anusha, for giving us this opportunity to come here and talk about our experiences. And hope we're able to convey something of use to everyone here. I see that we have over 130 people, so that's very encouraging. And yeah, let's just get right into it. Again, for introductions, I'm Akshat, and yeah, Suchitra will be talking after this. So Suchitra, should I hand it over to you?
Suchitra, you should be
Yeah.
unmuted now.
Now, okay. Sorry, I was not able to unmute myself for the awkward pause. So let's get started. Like how Amar said, he reached out to Akshat when he was giving interviews. All of us here, even I who am talking, and all of you who are listening, will be giving interviews at some point, and very excited to have a discussion around that. So let's get to the agenda page. We have agendas similar to how we had in the session where we spoke about how to write an effective resume. We will be starting with what mindset you should have when you're preparing for an interview. This is really important because unless you know what purpose or mindset or approach you should have, you will not be able to connect to several other things that we will then share with you as things you should do or not do. So that is what we'll begin with. The next section will be the interview prep section, which is the most important and also the one where we have the most amount of content, which is absolutely important for given the topic of this session. So Akshat will be talking about that. Then we have a dedicated section for online interviews. I don't think I need to explain more about how everybody and everything is moving more virtual. Even those who did not do it in the past are forced to do it. And now that they see the benefit of doing things online, even when things go back to normal, we will see a trend that more and more things will be done online. So a little bit focus on that. And then some do's and don'ts. And we'll end after that with some very broad interview concepts. Because we understand there are a lot of questions and no direct or straightforward answers. It's a very subjective topic. So we'll end with that as a wrap up. So moving on to winning interview mindset. We'll be connecting here from what we discussed when we had the session of how to write a resume effectively. The whole idea around that session when we were discussing various things was that the resume is not something that will directly get you a job, but it is something that will get your foot in the door and will hopefully arouse enough curiosity for the person reading your resume to invite you for an interview, and they will want to maybe speak to this person. Okay, who is this person? Sounds very interesting. Let's invite this person for an interview. So that is your objective when you write a resume. And now at some point you will definitely reach the next step, which is give an interview. And like we said in the resume, that you're not the only one. There are tens and 100,000 applications, and your job is to make sure that your application stands out. Similarly, your next step here, once you are entered the interview stage, will be to make sure you stand out and you convince the interviewer that you are the best person for the job. And before now, this whole workshop or 1 hour that we speak on this topic will be very focused on what to do when you have an interview. That's the assumption, and what will you be doing or what you should do to make sure you really need it. But before we step into that directly, we wanted to put things into perspective, because it's possible that a lot of you will be going through interview processes for the first time. That generally in any company, this is the process that is there during the whole hiring and selection. So it starts with an application where you'll have a resume submission, you have to apply somewhere. And then from there, it starts on every step is basically a filtration step where candidates are shortlisted further and further. And eventually one or multiple, depending on what they're hiring for, people are selected. So this will be focused on this stage of interview. And just to also give you some idea that an interview obviously is not one stage. There are multiple rounds, multiple discussions. Most likely the first person who will speak to you, or the first phone call or a video interview or in-person discussion you'll be having, will be from someone from the recruitment or the HR team. That person will be doing some basic expectation settings, giving you more information about the job and doing some basic screening of your profile. And then thereafter, it will be either someone doing a technical round of interview, someone doing a managerial round of interview. There will definitely be a hiring manager who will be speaking to you. Hiring manager is basically the person who is hiring for this role. It can be someone the role directly reports into, or someone who's just in charge of making hiring decisions for that business unit or something. And then there are other steps, like there is an assessment, there is reference and background check, and then final shortlisting, and then offer stage. But very important to note here that this is not a rule, and this is not what exactly happens, but these are roughly the steps. For example, the assessment that is after the interview is something that can even happen before. It can happen that you apply somewhere, you get an email saying your resume is shortlisted, and you will be told that here's a link to a test that we would like you to complete. So the assessments can be of different forms as well. It can be a psychometric assessment, which gives the interviewer more information about your personality, style of working, or it can be extremely technical for techies. For example, it's a coding test, or it can be a case study very specific to the role that you're supposed to solve and submit it, or solve and present it in an interview. So it can be various things. And the key takeaway I would like all of you to take from here is that be prepared and understand how it works, because then when you're actually faced in the situation, you shouldn't feel or shouldn't waste any time thinking, oh, but this is not what I expected, or oh, I was told that in assessments is after interview. It depends on the company. Even within a company, different departments have different processes. Even within a department, based on what kind of role it is, the processes can be different, because the ultimate goal of anyone who's hiring is to optimize the process in the best way possible to find the best candidate, and not go by a rule book or not go by what's written in HR books. So keep this in mind. And usually, just one last note, whoever speaks to you first should ideally tell you what the whole process looks like, at least roughly. If the person doesn't tell you, you should ask the person, and definitely they should give you some idea of what to expect, so that when you know where you are or what it is going to be from there on. So with this, we'll move on. Again, coming back and focusing on the interview stage, to the next one. Now, speaking about the mindset that I spoke about, it's very important to know that an interview is not something that where you are being questioned, or you are, say, in a CBI inquiry, or you are called to a principal's office because you did something and now they are testing you or making you walk on hot coals or anything. It is something where employees are trying to determine what if you are the best fit for the job. And it's obvious, like there's no question about this. But at the same time, it is also about you are assessing if the job and the environment is in line, if it is aligned to what you want to do and what your aspirations and ambition is. It's a two-way street. And once you set with this mindset, it will give you a lot more confidence. You have to remember that both sides of the table, people are making a choice. It's not just the employer who's going to decide your career and what's going to happen in your life, or if you're moving to a different city or not. It's not just them making this big decision for you, but you are also making a choice. And once you go, even not just in the interview, even in your whole preparation, once you have this mindset that it's a two-way street and you are having an equal level of discussion, then overall it will give you some confidence and some kind of purpose in doing this with that attitude. So hopefully this advice is helpful for you. And then now we'll jump on to the next section.
All right. Thank you, Suchitra, for the great introduction. So I'm going to be talking about interview prep. And this is by far the most important or biggest section that we like to cover. And if we look at how it's split into basically three different parts. There's a before, during, and after, right? Now, in the before part of the interview prep, again, I will be stressing mostly on this because you need to be really well prepared if you want to crack the interview, right? And this before part can be further broken down into three parts, right? So there is the research aspect, there's personal prep, and then there's practice. So I'll be talking about each of these parts in detail, and hopefully that sets a good stage for interview prep. So first, the research aspect. Now, research is all about doing your homework, right? So there are several things that you need to know. You need to know about the role, about the company, and I'm going to cover all that sort of methodically. So the first step is to know the company, right? And about the company, you want to go on its website, you want to find out its brief history, its mission statement, its goals, the products it has, any services it provides. And if possible, if you get a list of the people who are going to be interviewing you, do a quick LinkedIn search or a Google search and find out if they're available there, if you can see their profiles, their backgrounds, just to get an idea of who the person is. It helps you connect more with the interviewer, right? So that's always helpful. I have done it when I have applied for jobs. I've gotten a list of people who will be interviewing me, and I have just done a Google search. And it's okay if they see it, that's fine. They know that I am preparing for the interview, right? Now, another note is, if you have a friend or someone who works at the company, do talk to them before the interview. Get in touch. Just get to know more about the department, about the company, just as much as information that you can get, so that you have a foot in the door. You are already prepared, right? And it also increases your confidence a little bit, that, oh, I have someone I know and I have some knowledge going in, right? So that's about the company. But what's also important is to know the role, right? So of course you're going to be applying online or in response to a certain call for applications. So there will be a job description there. So you need to know the job description really well. You need to know what's expected from you, what qualifications are expected, just so that you're on the same page as the employer and the interviewer, right? And of course they will also list key skills that you need for this job. So it's always good to know all that beforehand. So do research the role, and these will also shape what else you need to prepare for this interview. And then also know the field. So tomorrow you have an interview and people ask you, hey, what do you think is the future of my company in the next 5 years, right? For that, you just don't need to know about the company, but you also need to know about the field. And it's always good to have an idea of general market trends, competitors, the general future of the field, a 5-year, 10-year projection, something like that. Of course, you don't need to do too much in-depth research, but something is good just to show that, hey, I've thought about this, right? So that's the first part of the research. And of course, there are many online friends that you have in form of websites like Wikipedia, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, and several other websites. So please do tap into these resources. They are very useful, and all the knowledge that you require is going to be on this, right? And of course, your personal network is separate. Reach out to people, right? Maybe people people you don't know yet. Send them a LinkedIn request and just ask, for a meeting, and hopefully they'll be happy enough to talk to you. Now, to further sort of pitch on Glassdoor, right? Because this is such a fantastic resource that I think everyone should be taking advantage of this, right? So a quick snapshot of the website that I took when I was preparing this presentation. Of course, I took an example company, Indian Oil Corporation, and I just did a Glassdoor search. And on this, you can see that there is just so much information, even about the job, all the different jobs for Indian Oil, right? So there are reviews which you can see. There are potentially jobs even for other companies which you can see. They have salary estimates for different roles, and then they also have the interview aspect, right? So focusing on the interview aspect, you see that there are some statistics as well. So everyone who went into Indian Oil for an interview, what was their experience? Was it positive, neutral, negative? You see those numbers there. How did they obtain an interview? Did they apply online or through campus recruiting, or were there any other avenues? And finally, the difficulty, right? So there are all these statistics which will sort of help you understand that, Indian Oil as a company, how is it interviewing there? And then, even a level deeper, you can go in and look at some people's detailed reviews, where they have even described how their interview went. So, the interviewer was kind, made you feel at ease. In group discussion and technical interview, they consider everyone's stance. So, explore, feel free to explore this. You may need to log in and give your information, but I'm telling you, it's totally worth it. And some reviews are so detailed, they will even tell you what questions were asked in the interview. So very important. Tap into this resource. All right, that brings me to by far the most important aspect of research, and that is to know yourself. Because if you don't know yourself, you're not going to be able to do well in the interview, right? And certain aspects of how to know yourself better, what is the procedure to get to the interview by knowing yourself, is make a list, prepare a list of questions that you may expect. These can be technical questions related to the job or the role of the company, and just prepare answers for that. For example, explain what distillation is, right? You can write down that answer, right? And there may be some things on your resume which need explanation. Write those down. There's no harm in getting that clarity on paper, right? But the more important place where this is required is in the behavioral questions. So if someone asks you that, how are you going to handle a tough situation at work? Say you have a conflict with someone. Now that is not something which you automatically just know the answer to that. You have to think about it. You have to recollect situations based on your previous experiences. And what I really recommend, and this is something I did, and I passed on this knowledge to others too, write down these answers. So make a list of questions, write down these answers to the questions, and just keep practicing them. So go through, okay, this is what I did. This is my, going to be at least the framework of my answer for this question. You don't need to learn it by heart, but you just need to have an idea that, hey, this is what I did in that situation, right? So I did say that list out all expected questions, but let's first see what sort of questions there are out there, right? Because different people, depending, as Suchitra mentioned, there's going to be a managerial interview, there's going to be a technical interview. So there are going to be different types of questions, and you can visualize it as a spectrum. So you will have anything from one extreme of competency, which is going to basically judge your technical knowledge, right down to behavioral or situational. So how you respond to certain situations, how you behave in certain situations. That is more the emotional quotient or soft skills of aspect of your personality, right? And even within the spectrum, you can see that we can break it down into certain types of questions. For example, closer to the competency part, we have questions which showcase your ability. So, for example, what were your previous responsibilities at your job or your internship or wherever, right? Then there'll be questions which will ask you to demonstrate your knowledge. How do you think this industry will look in the next 5 years? So this goes back to your research about the company, about the field, right? So, but that's more knowledge. Then they'll ask you things which will tell them about your qualification. So explain how you found a creative solution to the problem, right? And that you can always say, hey, I took this course in my bachelor's which taught me how to solve this problem in a certain way. It gave me this theoretical knowledge, right? And that gives an idea of the qualification. And then finally, as you move down, you'll see that we're getting closer to this behavioral aspect of the interview, right? So then they're going to start assessing your personality. They're going to ask you questions like, why do you think you're right for this job? And that time you have to be like, okay, I have these skills. I feel I bring this to this, to the culture of this company. I'm a good team player. You can say all those kinds of things. And that is going to be more sort of not on the knowledge level, but on how you work and how you are as a person, right? And then finally, predicting behavior. So how will you react in tough situations? Employers always want to know that. This is by far their most favorite question. So you want to prepare for these kinds of questions, right? So now I spoke about what types of questions there are, but how about answering these questions, right? I'm going to propose a simple process, 4-step process, and it is simply listen, think, structure, deliver. And I'll very quickly summarize this process. Whenever someone asks you a question, make sure you're paying full attention. Listen to the question, make sure you've understood the question, and then begin to think, okay, what is going to be my response to this question? Have I completely understood the question? If I haven't, I'm going to ask the interviewer, can you please repeat it? I have not completely understood the question. And there's no harm in doing that, right? Then you think. And as you think, you think back to the time you practiced all these questions, or when you thought about yourself. And then you start to build a structure in your answer. And that structure is actually very important because it has to be a very clear, logical flow of things that you want to convey. And then finally, you will deliver this answer. And my only tip there is just deliver it with confidence and clarity, right? But the most important aspect of this whole process, I think, is the structure. And you need to know how to structure it best so that you can convey it as a logical story, right? So if you do a Google search, even, right, you'll see this thing called the star approach. This is by far the most popular approach that people take to answering questions, especially behavioral questions, right? That how did you behave? How did you react in this particular situation? And to break this down, what the star approach actually is, it is S is for situation. So the way you start a story is you provide a very quick background. You set the stage, right? Then you move on and you define the task. So what was your responsibility in this particular situation after you've given the background, right? And then is the actual part of the answer, the meat of the answer, which is the action. What did you do in the situation? How did you respond to the situation? So this is going to be the bigger part of the story. And then finally, you want to also talk about the result. Did it lead anywhere? Was the result positive? Unfortunately, was it a negative result? So you want to be able to have a very nice flow of the story. And we'll cover it. We'll talk about this in a few slides. Now, let's talk about some aspects of a good answer. And this may be a little bit of repetition of things which I've already spoken about, but it's always good to re-emphasize these qualities, right? So a good answer, you can think of it as having good content and at the same time having these soft skills, the aspect of soft skills, right? Now, when you look at content, it's all about being attentive. So listening to the question, right? And then thinking. So introspect. Take a moment, think about the answer, think about the question, think about how you're going to frame the answer. Structure, which we just spoke about in the last slide, convey a logical story. And then one thing which I didn't talk about is providing examples, because this is something which makes it much easier to understand your story. It makes it more relatable. People will be like, oh, okay, yeah, this is how you did it. Nice, great. They'll be able to appreciate it better, right? So that is the content aspect of the good answer. And then you have the soft skills aspect, and these are more, prescriptive things which we're going to tell you. So be positive. Try not to say no. I'm saying a lot of no, I know, but try not to say no. Be positive. Handle or approach situations in a positive manner. Right? Be honest. There's no replacement for honesty, and you do not want to say something which you don't believe in or which is untrue, because once you say that, there is a chance that people will probe further and want to know more about it, and very quickly they're going to discover that you have lied, right? So be genuine and be consistent. So if two different people ask you the same question, right, try to be more or less the same in response, right? Otherwise they're going to go back later and they're going to discuss and be like, this person gave two different answers to our question. What does this mean? So you want to also try to be consistent, right? You want to be clear and concise. So answer only what's asked. You don't need to beat around the bush. Give 10 sentences where only one sentence is enough. Be clear. And this comes with practice. I myself struggle with this. Okay. Even after having taken interviews, having interviewed other people, this is still something I struggle with. So it's natural, but try to have this focus in mind, right? And finally, be strategic. And I would say this final strategy, it encompasses all these, the content and the soft skills that I've just discussed, because you want to be clever. You don't want to tell people things that they don't need to know, right? You don't want to be overly negative. You want to be honest, but then you don't want to tell them things like, oh, I don't meet deadlines. No, you want to be clever, right? And then you want to be concise, and you also want to be confident, right? So that's what makes up a good answer. Now let me give you a personal example of some answer which I structured in response to a particular question. So I just picked out this question from online, right? Tell me about a time you had to be very strategic in order to meet all your top priorities. So I took the star approach. I laid out the situation, right? And this is a true story. Obviously, I'm not going to lie about this, right? So the situation was that once during my PhD, I was supposed to attend this conference in a few weeks, and I had several parallel projects going on. Right? And my task was that I had to not only complete my work for the conference, but also guide other students and mentor other students in their projects. And also, in addition, manage 2 other new projects, right? Now, the action part of my answer, of course, it's the largest part. So what I said there is I spoke to my colleagues, I spoke to the students whom I was guiding, and we came up with a plan. Right? I told them we had to work in complete coordination to finish up everything successfully. And we took turns to do this. So first I focused on my project, then my colleagues helped me complete it. And finally, then I helped them with their projects and presentations for the conference, right? And I was honest. I said I had to request my advisor to pause this new project, which I had to start working on. And I told him that, I'd come back and I'd start working on it. And wherever possible, I asked other people to help me out. Now, the result of that was not only my colleagues, but even my poster and presentation went off well at the conference. And my advisor was pleased with the outcome. I returned from the conference, resumed the projects which I had paused, and that also finally, yielded success. So win-win situation, right? Now, this was the answer that I came up with. I hope it came across to all of you as a story, because that was the intention. So this is how you maybe want to structure the answers, right? Now, certain aspects which you want to touch upon, like the soft skills, which I mentioned before, right? You want to be positive. So complete coordination to finish things successfully. When you insert these keywords, that's positivity. Honesty. I had to request my advisor to pause the side project. That's a negative, but then I was honest about it, right? And overall, I would say that I was pretty clear in what I wanted to communicate. And I was also strategic. I didn't give things which were not required. I told them how I met my priorities and how I met my deadlines, right? So that's a personal example. And everyone, all of you are going to have different stories for this. So make sure that you have a similar flow. Okay, so I did talk about questions, and I want to give some examples of some good questions that may be thrown around in the interview process, right? So first, let's see what they can ask you. So some examples, right? The first question that you're probably going to get from anybody is, tell me about yourself. And this is going to be the elevator pitch kind of a question, where you prepare a 30-second paragraph about yourself and you're like, hey, this is me, this is what I've done, this is my experience, and I'm really excited to work at this company and in this role, and then these are my skills, etc., right? And of course, you have to be confident and very clear on what you want to say. Then they'll ask you, why this company? And you have to have an answer prepared for that. You can't be like, oh, the salary is good. I mean, that may be an honest answer, but you have to come up with a more logical and think more about it, right? Why this company, right? I'm interested in the work, etc. Right? Then there are other things like, why this position? What sets you apart from other candidates? Tell us about a time when you experienced and resolved a conflict. So these are all things to think about. This is not something which I ask you right now and you'll just have an answer for this, right? So you need to spend time and think about these questions. But going back to Suchitra's point of two-way street, the employers are trying to ask you and grill you and see how competent you are. But it's also a two-way street. If you are interested in joining this company, you need to make sure that they are also good, right? So you will also ask them questions. Now, what you should ask them are questions which come out of curiosity, and they should be well thought out questions. So make sure to ask good questions, because what happens is this sets you apart from the other candidates which may be coming into that interview, right? So for example, there are 10 people interviewing for a position, and you're one out of those 10 people. Now the interviewers are mostly going to ask similar questions to all those 10 people, so that there's a fair comparison between all the 10 candidates. Now what sets you apart from them. It's actually the questions that you ask them, because that's where you can be different. You can add your own flavor to this, and you can actually impress the interviewers, and they'll be like, wow, that was a pretty good question that this person asked me. So that will lead you to impress your interviewers, right? Now let's see some examples of what you can actually ask them, right? So you can ask them things like, okay, if I do end up joining this role, what is my day-to-day work and responsibility going to look like? Then other things like, how are projects assigned in this company? How am I going to get projects, right? What is the potential for working with other departments and having collaborations beyond my department, right? These are all good questions because you're actually curious. You don't know all this beforehand, right? And then a very good question that actually I was interviewing someone a few weeks back, and they asked me this question, and I actually quite liked it. What is your ideal candidate? So what are you looking for in a candidate? And I was pretty impressed because they want to know, okay, how can I improve? What should I bring to the table? And what are you looking for? So because you kind of need to match expectations as well, right? And then finally, things like, what are the responsibilities associated with this role? So of course, there are many more. I have just listed down 5 for each set of examples. But another thing I'd like to point out is you have already had maybe an interview, right? With say a one-on-one interview or a panel interview where the interviewers have told you things about the company. And maybe you want to clarify certain things. So there can be follow-up questions from previous discussions with the company during the interview process. So make sure that you note down things, right? That, hey, this is a question which is really bugging me. I need to ask this to the interviewer, right? And ask it. So that concludes the research part. I know it was sort of long, but trust me, if you do it well, you will be really like, that's 50% of the job done, more than 50% of the job done there. The next part is personal prep. And this is, just before the interview. What do you need to do just before it, right? Firstly, we cannot stress this enough. Be punctual, be on time. If required, be before time, right? And related to that is plan your route and arrival, right? Now, of course, this applies more to an actual in-person interview where you're going somewhere, and maybe not on an online, but even online, make sure that you're ready and you're logged in to the call, if it's a Zoom call or whatever. And Suchitra will be talking more about that, right? But time is of the essence. No one likes a candidate being late. And work backwards. Tomorrow, if I have to take a train from South Bombay to a suburb of Bombay, I'll plan, okay, how much time is the train going to take? How much time am I going to take to get to the station? All those kinds of things. You have to plan all that. If required, go there one day before your interview and just check out the office building and, oh, okay, I have to go here. Do those things, right? Then get a good night's sleep. I know, again, it's very difficult for me to say this. I have struggled with sleep before interviews myself. So, but if possible, it sleep is extremely important and extremely underrated. So make sure you sleep well so that you're refreshed and ready to go into the interview with a fresh mindset, right? Stay hydrated. As I'm talking to you guys right now, my throat is drying up and my mouth is drying up. So keep a water bottle with you, right? It's always good. You'll feel more hydrated and take a break, right? In the interview, say, can I just have a sip of water? That's fine. Fuel up. Now, for different people, these things work differently. Some people prefer to have coffee before their interview. Some people prefer to have fruits, whatever keeps you fresh, right? Don't eat a heavy meal before going into an interview. You'll just feel sleepy and you won't be attentive, right? Eat something which gets the blood racing, right? And even better, exercise. I don't know how many people actually do this, but just some quick 5-10 minutes yoga in the morning and your brain will be fresher, right? So whatever works for you. And then finally, look presentable. Whether it's an online interview or an in-person interview, dress well and dress appropriately. So beforehand, you may want to reach out to the recruiter and ask them, okay, what is the typical dress code at the workplace? And I will dress accordingly. right? You don't want to go to a Google interview where everyone is wearing t-shirt and jeans, and you don't want to go in a blazer and a suit and a tie, right? You'll feel out of place. So you don't want to feel out of place, but at the same time, you want to look presentable and confident, right? So that is all about personal prep. And again, it's very important that there are little things which sometimes matter a lot. And finally, practice. No substitution for practice. And this is one way in which you guys are going to get your confidence up. First point there, revise your resume. Every word on your resume is subject to scrutiny. An interviewer can see, okay, skills, this word is written. I'm going to ask, what is the background? What is the concept behind this skill? You need to know that. If you don't know it, just don't have it on your resume. I think Suchitra has done a pretty good job telling you what to put and what not to put on your resume, right? If you're giving a presentation, like say, there's a case study or you're asked to talk about your previous work, make notes, make sure you've rehearsed that presentation, practice until you're comfortable with the flow of that presentation. And then you'll be able to deliver it much better. Rehearse potential questions. So we've spoken a lot about this already. Write out expected questions, write out your answers, and just rehearse them for content and delivery, right? Talk to yourself in the mirror. Make sure, okay, how do I actually look when I'm giving an answer, right? And the amazing invention of technology where you have phones with a selfie mode, just record yourself as you're giving that answer and watch your recording after you're done giving that answer and evaluate yourself, right? Another tip which we can give you is practice. Like, tell a friend, hey, can you please just take out 1 hour of your time and do a mock interview with me, right? Or a family member, and I'm sure they'll be happy to help you out. So, but from that, not only will you get confidence, you'll see where you're lacking, and maybe it'll tell you where to improve more, right? So that's about practice. There's no substitute for practice. Now the root of all this, and this is something which I think there's no harm in addressing this topic. It happens to all of us. So let's just get it out there. We all are anxious in different points of our life. We are, especially before interviews, because there's just so much uncertainty. Like, oh, what questions will be asked? Do I know enough? Am I good enough? All those questions will come. But you need to overcome that anxiety because you just have to do well, right? Now, in your first interview, you're obviously going to have the highest amount of anxiety, right? But as and when you keep going through the interview process, you'll have more interviews, you'll get practice, you'll build confidence, you'll keep doing better. So my advice is interview as much as you can. Even if it comes from a company where you're not interested in working, go for it. Go for it for the practice, right? And just see your confidence, it'll improve. If you're stressed, even during an interview, just take a deep breath. This is just general advice I give people when they're stressed in any situation. Take deep breaths. It's almost like a restart. You're restarting your system. Don't panic. And I've said this before, that you can ask for time, you can ask to repeat the question. If you want to recollect your answer, ask for time. No one is going to deny you time, right? And it will help you not panic. So make sure you actually do this in the interview. And this comes to being honest, right? Honesty and anxiety are very closely related. We don't think about it as much, but it's related, right? When you lie, you suddenly become very anxious. So you don't want to go down that route where, oh, I'm trying to give an answer and I'm going very roundabout, and I'm not very sure what I'm saying, and then I get caught, so that just adds to my anxiety. So if you don't know something, think about it, give it a good shot, give an answer. But if you're not happy about it and you're unsure and you don't know it, be honest. Tell the interviewer, I'm really sorry, I'm not able to recollect the answer, or I'm not able to think of an answer right now, but can I please get back to you via email? I'd be happy to do some more research on this and get back. And there are always ways of saying this, right? You can't say like, oh, I don't know. There are better ways of saying that, right? So that was the whole before aspect, and build up to all this anxiety talk as well. So I hope that was clear, and make sure, really just make sure that you're following all these steps, and you will be in a good spot. Moving on to the during part of preparation, these sections are going to be pretty quick, but these are always good reminders to have, right? Now, Suchitra did touch on the aspect of types of interviews when she was going through the whole process of filtering and application and everything, right? But just to re-emphasize that point, because there are going to be different types of interviews you have in your life. Most of them are going to start on the phone, where it's going to be a phone screening to see if you're a good fit. And mostly it's going to be with an HR recruiter. Sometimes they put you in touch directly with the hiring manager whom you're going to be reporting to. So it really depends. But even on the phone, you want to have a notebook in front of you. You want to take notes. And at the same time, if there are some things which you want to convey to the interviewer, you want to have them sort of written down, like tell us about yourself and all that, right? So that's the phone interview. Then I think the next aspect of the filtration is group discussion, and this is something we see a lot in India. It's actually not very common here in the US to have group discussions, maybe because the population is so low. But typically when you have many applicants, it's better to have a group discussion to then select the best who have performed in that group discussion, right? And here you want to be careful. You don't want to be too aggressive and overpowering and getting your point there very aggressively. At the same time, you don't want to be calm and quiet. So you want to be somewhere in the middle where you get your point across effectively, but with respect, with a smile on your face, and with a certain level of confidence and firmness, right? Then that brings us to the more. So you say you've passed the phone interview, you've passed the group discussion. Now you're in one-on-one land, and that is where I would say this is the easier part of the interview, where you have time with one person. So all your focus is on that one person, right? And they're going to ask you a question. You're going to think about it and give the answer, right? And people are not out there to put pressure on you. Interviews in general these days are not a pressure test. So don't worry too much going into the interview. Oh, this person, they're so senior to me, I'm feeling intimidated, I'm feeling inferior. No, think like you're talking to another person. They're asking you questions, you're giving them answers, right? Sometimes it can even be with a panel, so it need not be a one-on-one, it may be a two-on-one or three-on-one, right, interview. And here you want to make sure you're treating everyone equally. You don't want to give more time to one person or more preference to one person just because you think, oh, they're the senior person or something. That shows negatively. So make sure you're giving enough time to everyone and you're being inclusive, right? And then finally, you have the video interview category, which is probably the most common interview process these days. And this can be with a panel, it can be one-on-one. I don't know if there are group video interviews, but Suchitra will be talking more about this, so I'll not steal her thunder there. And then another thing that you want to keep in mind during the interview is body language. And here I'm just going to provide some very quick do's and don'ts. This may be funnier than required, but it's all for your benefit. So do smile, be positive, have a smile on your face. No one likes to see a frowning face. Make eye contact. It shows confidence. It shows that you're not afraid. Nod your head, not too much, but the right amount, that it shows that you're registering and that you're understanding and that you're on the same page as the interviewer. Lean ahead. Don't sit back and relax. Don't be like too forward leaning. Be the right amount, have a maintained posture, and balance it well throughout the interview, right? And then some don'ts. Don't slouch. Sit straight, or lean ahead. Slouching means you're tired or exhausted. No one likes to see that. Don't point, especially in a group discussion. Do not point. When I was in undergrad in ICT, I have seen some group discussions and people were pointing everywhere. I was like, no, this is not the right way to do the group discussion. There's just chaos. It feels like a TV show. And don't keep your hands in your pockets. You come across as too casual, right? So be professional. And finally, don't say no too much. It's good to say no sometimes, but shaking your head sideways too much, it gives the wrong impression. It's sort of similar to smiling a lot. So smile more. Don't shake your head sideways too much. And that brings me to the after part of the interview. So that was the during. I think it was pretty clear that body language is extremely important during the interview. But after the interview, there are certain steps which we would really recommend you follow once you're done with the interview process. First thing, say thank you. Just sending a quick thank you note or an email or even messaging or calling your hiring manager or recruiter, it leaves a great impression, right? Be patient. One day after your interview, please don't send an email saying, hey, am I hired? Or hey, what is the status of my interview? Wait for a week at least, or for a few days at least. But don't wait too long, right? Otherwise, are you not interested in the position? So there is that sweet spot of time which you need to wait for before you follow up. So send a polite email in about a week inquiring about your status. And there is a way to write that also. Hello, dear sir, I was just wondering if you have interviewed other candidates or what the status of my interview was. I just wanted to gently follow up, something like that. It may be different, right? And then finally, let them know. So the more transparent you are with the company, the better it is for you. So if you get an offer from one company, do let the other companies know. And this serves two purposes. One, it shows that you're professional, that you're not misleading or leading on other companies. But two, it tells the other companies that, oh, this person has already got an offer. Should we be making an offer to this person? And then they'll start thinking, probably we'll make the offer. So it pushes other companies to consider you. And then once you have multiple offers, then it's your game. Then you pick and play, right? And you can negotiate and you can do all those other things. So be honest, be professional. So that was the after part. And now this brings me to a very interesting topic, which I'm going to conclude with, which is about English. I'm not particularly fond of English, but I have to speak in it every day. I know that. And there's unfortunately our society is not structured that way that there is any way to work around it. So I will start by saying that English is a funny language because it trips us up multiple times, right? Wouldn't it be easier to just talk in your mother tongue and have a translation app which converts it to English? Unfortunately, the technology, society, it's not that far yet. And unfortunately, it's important. You need to know English, right? And I know that this can be a problem for some people. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to try to address this issue to our best capability. So before we get into the solutions, let's look at the problem. For effective communication, you need to have a good command on your English. But if you have poor English, that leads to poor confidence or low confidence. That leads to bad communication. And then it's sort of like it just keeps going. It's a vicious cycle because now you're psychologically also thinking, oh, I'm not good at English. My confidence is low. My communication will be bad, right? You want to try to break out of this loop. And the problem is that in our society, it's not just about English. It's about the social stigma associated with English and how it negatively impacts our confidence, right? I see that I've made a typographical error here as I'm talking about English. So you see, we are all bad at this, right? But I think it's important to understand that it's a social stigma and that we need to address the problem. So what do we do? Now, to that, I'm going to propose two solutions. One is a short-term solution and then a long-term solution. And before I get into the solutions, let me tell you that no one learns English overnight. It's a learning process. You have to carry it on slowly, steadily, gradually, but it has to be a continuous improvement process. So if you have an interview tomorrow, and you say, I don't know English very well, you are not going to be ready in one day and be just suddenly have great English, right? So it has to be, you need to start today. If you feel that's a problem, you need to start right now. Take it in your hand and just learn, right? So a short-term solution, it's like putting a band-aid on a wound, right? It's just going to cover it up for a few days. It's not really going to address the problem. But still, if you have an interview coming up and you're not very confident about your English, forget it. Be comfortable with your current self. Go in with whatever you have, right? You know the answers, you have practiced and rehearsed them. Just say it in the best way you can. Practice hard and just focus on being confident. That's all you need to do, right? Yes, it's going to be difficult, but you have to push through it and you have to get it, right? But the better solution is the long-term solution, where you build your English and thereby your confidence through dedication and continuous improvement. And as I said at the beginning, take ownership. Make most of the time that you have right now. Learn, because that's how you're going to improve. If you're in your second year of bachelor's or third year of bachelor's, or any wherever you are, you still have time. So don't waste that time. Just start. And for the long-term solution, there is something else we'd like to, a more detailed structure we'd like to propose. Be open, be humble, because you're going to fall, and that's how you learn. You learn from your mistakes. Even as a child, you learn from your mistakes. And be willing. You have to be willing to improve. There are a lot of resources out there for you to learn. 20 years ago, I may not have had the same confidence as I have today, but there's just so much out there. Grammarly, British Council, there are apps, there's YouTube, which is it's free for everyone to learn from, right? Explore, browse articles, watch TV shows, watch documentaries. These are great ways. And a tip which I'll give you, right? Tomorrow you're watching something on the news and they say, this situation is going on in Maharashtra, right? Repeat that sentence in your head. Be observant. Repeat it. This is the situation going on in Maharashtra. Currently, this is happening in Maharashtra. Try to internalize, oh, this is how the sentence is being framed, right? So these are very small tips which you can use for yourself. Use a mirror. Same thing. Record yourself. Ask friends and family to help. Don't care about the judgment. There is going to be a lot of judgment, but is that going to help you improve? No. Read, write, listen, speak on a daily basis, continuously. And remember, you may fall and you may fail, but that's fine. It's part of the process. Keep going. And with that, I think Amar introduced this at the beginning in the introduction, that they are going to have this program called Empower, just to address specifically this issue of confidence, anxiety, English speaking. And we are actually going to conduct this program later in this year. So I strongly recommend people who think this is a problem, register for it. And let me tell you something, you have to be proactive in this process, right? No one is going to do these things for you. You have to be as in it as us, as we are trying to guide you through this. So yeah, with that, that's all I had to offer, and I'll hand it back to Suchitra, and she'll talk about online and virtual interviews.
Okay. Thanks, Akshat. That was very comprehensive, really good. We'll quickly touch upon some concepts we thought we should focus some time on in this seminar. So let's quickly get on with it. So like I said, while reading out the agenda, why we thought we should spend some time on the online and virtual interviews, especially now that everybody is working from home and virtually. So we have a few tips there. A lot of those tips are similar to what we have to say about personal interviews. So mostly I'll just focus on what is different or what you should keep in mind specifically about the online interview. So going to the next slide, we have one more. Yeah, so we have 2 E's for you to begin with. Very, very important. You by now have heard so much about all the things you need to do before an interview while you're preparing for an interview, even just before your interview, right? It's very, very likely that amidst all of that's on your plate already, some of these small things you might miss out. So take this as a checklist, put it down somewhere, add some of your own pointers, and always refer to it before your online interviews. That will really help you, because no matter how much you prepare, if you forget some of these things, like let's take a look at the first one: ensure a stable internet connection. If this is not being taken care of, then no matter what questions you are prepared for, the whole time you'll just be getting disconnected or asking if they can hear you clearly. Probably not. And that will ruin your entire experience. And of course, it happens even if you are very sure of what your internet connection, and it's something you can't control. But it still matters that you did your best, because some employers can give a second chance if an interview absolutely does not happen, but others might just not. They can't give it. They don't have a choice. They really have to make a decision, and you might lose an opportunity just because of that. So make sure you have a stable internet connection. Any equipment that you use for audio, video, and actually here I would like to say, use your laptop or a desktop. Do not use your mobile phone. Make sure the audio video is working well. If you have, say, borrowed earphones, use earphones first of all. If you have borrowed earphones from a friend or bought new earphones, test them out. Sometimes suddenly they stop working, so please test them out. And about the mobile phone, which is not mentioned here, but important to add as well, do not use it, because the camera sometimes, even right now when we interview, it's zoomed in very closely to the person's eyes, and that's all we see during the interview. Or sometimes it's shaking so much that after a 1 hour interview, I or any other interview have a really bad headache, because the whole time the screen was continuously moving, and you can imagine how that must feel. So make sure your equipment is good, ready in the best way possible, so that will set you up for success. Check for computer restrictions and apps. Online interviews are conducted on different platforms. It depends on what the company who's interviewing is using, what software. And sometimes it needs you to have some plugins or downloads, or sometimes simply your firewall will not allow for the session to begin. So check for those restrictions, do a dry run to take care of these things. Make sure the camera angle and lighting is proper. Even now, even when we interview some senior candidates, it happens, and you might think it's common sense, but sometimes it just doesn't work out. We see people who have their video on, but all we can see is a black shadow because they are sitting against the light. And the first 5 or 10 minutes of the interview is lost in just making sure that the person is again sitting in a position that's well lit, or we are able to at least see each other. And then those minutes are precious, like how we said, every single minute counts, and it helps you create a perception. And then you're simply losing that time in some of these small things. Manage all possible distractions. This is also something to really carefully think about. If you have something like Ganesh Chaturthi going on in the society, make sure you are in a room where they cannot hear noise. Even if you have pets in the house, make sure they are not in the room. If you have kids in the house, for example, I actually was giving an interview, and I had a toddler in the house, my niece, who just started walking. And I thought the solution to the problem is just shut the door, tell my mom that I have an interview, and sit in the room. But she became more curious because the door was shut. So while I was giving interview, the whole time she was banging on the door, yelling my name. And then I had to excuse myself and tell my mom, because my mom was in the kitchen, that, please, she's here and she's trying to get inside the room. And that obviously I had to be honest with the interviewer after trying to ignore it for a minute. It was very obvious when they could hear it. So I had to be honest, excuse myself and do this. But I would do anything now to avoid being in this situation, because it doesn't work. It distracts you at that moment, and that kind of distraction is even more serious than others, because then you even begin to panic. It's not even anxiety. All of this, again, do a test run Monday prior. This is equivalent to what Akshat mentioned, that probably even find out your route and go see where the building is located when it's a case of an in-person interview. The equivalent of that would be do a test run one day prior with a friend or a relative or someone even in the same house. Just go to a different room and connect on different devices. Very, very, very helpful. And lastly, turn off all notifications. This is again from my experience. Sometimes you have WhatsApp web on or LinkedIn on or some other browser on, and your sound is obviously on, right? So whatever messages come there, it shows up. And then while you are in a video, it's very difficult to then go find which browser is it or what is on, where the noise is even coming from. And you don't want to be doing that when someone is asking you a question, because you probably are not even listening to the question while figuring all this out. So very, very important. Like I said before, these things are not the things you even want to spend your time on while you're preparing, to think that, okay, what do I need to take care of? So make a list, add a few of your own items that might come to you and just keep it somewhere. And anytime you have an interview, just make sure you check all of the boxes and then you're set. And lastly, just wanted to kind of give you an idea that maybe some of us are very used to using Zoom or Google Meets, but there are a lot more platforms out there. Different companies use Blue Jeans, WebEx, Skype. I have personally used at least 5 or 6 of these, and others I don't know. But all of these have different interface. So it will be great if you can familiarize yourself or based on whatever link it's there in the calendar invite. Just 2 minutes before your interview is not the time when you should be looking at it. Check it out one day before, because where to unmute yourself, how does the video start, where does it ask for permission, how to go full screen. It's all different in all of these. And you don't want to be distracted figuring this out while you're at the interview itself. Let's move on to the next one. It's about, again, repeating some of the things about being professional and punctual. The only thing I would probably like to say here that is being conscious of it being a virtual interview is do not underestimate these preparations just because it's a virtual interview. Do all the things, show up on time or before the time, dress for the part. Again, do exactly what you would do in an in-person interview. Check your surroundings and background, what is visible behind you. If it's not behind you, probably there's a mirror behind you where some things are visible. So make sure you remove all the distractions. This is an advantage. You should leverage the fact that it is a virtual interview where you can have your resume and notes handy. You can even have your sticky notes or reminders on whatever device that you're using. That will be great, will be helpful for you as opposed to having an in-person interview. And lastly, always make eye contact. This is true even when you're doing an in-person interview, but you have to be aware that when you are speaking on a virtual interview, this is the only part that's visible to them. So other aspects of body language or anything else where they can read you or see how you express your answers are removed, and this is the focus area. So make sure you don't have a poker face. You are nodding and you are making eye contact. And lastly, if you click one more, Akshat. Please don't do this. It can be exciting, thrilling, something you would like to do and boast about it in front of your friends. But there is no point doing this. It's not just about accidentally, maybe you have to get up or someone knows that, you're dressed appropriately and but you're wearing shorts or something during interviews. But it also psychologically makes a difference about how you feel and how confident you are when you're actually giving an interview. And then the last part of this, again, about the same thing that you have, this is a limited window and you're not meeting someone in person. Make sure when you are online, it's even more important to listen carefully, be attentive. On both ends, you have to put in a bit more extra efforts when it's a virtual interview. So just keep these things in mind. You do not interrupt someone, repeat the question to reconfirm, be clear and concise yourself, and be aware of your facial expressions. So the point of this whole thing is that it is just as important to prepare and keep these things in mind as it is for an in-person interview. And like I said, more and more companies are moving towards using this once they see the advantage of this, how fast the process moves when it's an in-person interview. So definitely something you should be prepared for. The next section that we have was Actually, when we started preparing this, we made it as a do's and don'ts section. But then we realized we are covering a lot of do's in the whole agenda items that we had previously. But there are some don'ts that are very, very important. It's fine if you don't do 20, 30, or even 40% of the do's, because it's a mixed bag of tips. But these don'ts are something that are really important and something you should not ignore at all, and can cost you if you ignore it. And let's discuss how. So if you see here, we have about 4 points, very important. The first one is, in an interview, when you're speaking to someone, don't speak poorly about your current or former employer. And this might even apply to your university or wherever you're studying. This is really in bad taste. It's possible that even it comes up in a way that the interviewer himself or herself is insinuating it or instigating you into the topic, and you feel like, oh, maybe going and following this might help your candidature, but that's not true. It also showcases about how you will handle yourself when you join the company, because there are different teams, you are collaborating with different teams. So this is definitely something you should avoid, even unknowingly. You might not want to do this, but it might happen unknowingly. So one thing we would like to, we think is a good reminder is a newspaper test, where imagine whatever you're saying in the interview, if it's getting published in the front page of a newspaper tomorrow, are you going to get into trouble? If your answer is yes, or if you are saying you don't know, maybe, then don't go for it and don't share those things. The next one under don'ts is probably something that we, Akshat also covered. Do not falsify information in your resume. So it will, the more people probe or the more you speak to more and more interviewers, it will obviously come out. And that again is not going to help your candidature. The next one is that you are there for an interview and you probably are talking about topics you're really passionate about, etc. But you have to understand what is the purpose of that discussion. So do not needlessly argue or speak over the interview. At the end of the interview, probably that's the only thing the person might remember, and won't remember anything else that we discussed before that. That will overshadow everything else and will create a bias. So don't speak over, do not debate or argue about some topics, and just steer clear of it. And you can even politely excuse yourself if you see the discussion moving in that direction. And lastly, this is something important for interviewers as well, but it's equally important for you, that you do not ask personal questions or discuss personal matters. You should know where you should draw a line. Again, most of these, including the last point, is something that even reflects how you carry yourself as a person and how you will carry yourself when they hire you and you will join the company and work together in the team. So like I mentioned earlier, absolutely really important points, and something which is, if you want to remember one of the two things, then probably remember the don'ts. Do's is something that might naturally come to you as well. But this is something that I said might overshadow your entire preparation or all your interviews, even that went really well previously. And just before we move on to the next topic, remember that these days all companies use systems, and there are scorecards and there are notes about every candidate that are there in the system and available even 3 or 4 years later. So whatever happens in the interview is being noted down somewhere. So even if it's not the same interviewer you're talking to the next time you apply to the company, even 2 years later, that person will be able to see the information and the notes of what happened before. So just be mindful of that. And we just have one last section about broader interview concepts. Here we wanted to wrap it up by just saying, reiterating some of the things we already mentioned. The first one being practice. So practicing is really important. And I think Akshat mentioned it before. Every time, the first time you speak, and then every other time you do give an interview, your anxiety is even better. For example, this is my second session here under Spark, and today I was definitely 50% less anxious than I was in the first one, just because I already had one. I knew how it looks like, I know how the interface is. So it really, really makes a difference. And you shouldn't underestimate how much difference it makes. And you wouldn't want to understand this by actually going through interviews and not having some good interviews initially. You create some opportunities for yourself, do some mock interviews, go for interviews with companies that you probably don't want to join, but at least it gives you a sense of what are people asking, what are your weaknesses, how do you react, or where do you get uncomfortable, and that helps you with the next one. The second thing while discussing about this whole seminar that came to us is, no matter how much we say about what the best practice is, it's very important to understand what the company you're interviewing is like. We have a whole realm of companies, right from startups to very mature companies who've been around for 70, 80 years. And every company has a different culture. So this is just an example of Akshat's company itself, where they now look for culture add and not culture fit, which means they encourage diversity, or they welcome diversity, because that's what they believe in will bring more ideas. So it's possible that nothing is right or wrong, but you have to at least understand where your company stands to some extent. You won't know it absolutely correctly, but to some extent as to what they are looking for, and then see how you fit in and give your answers accordingly. And lastly, you will give a lot of interviews throughout, not just because you're not getting into a company, but even once you start getting jobs, you will move on to more jobs. So there will be a lot of occasions where you will be interviewing. And someone from the other side of the table, I would like to maybe put this into your mind and leave you with this thought, that rejection in an interview is never personal for the company, but it is very personal for you as a candidate. But you have to understand that it's never about you. They did not reject you for being you. It's just that there were 10 applications, and out of those 10 applications, they found the best person. That best person can be 5% better than you, or maybe 50% better than you. But you don't have a control over that, because that's always going to happen. But what you have control over is how to take it. Do you want to just get down and say, oh, I was the best, how can I not be the person? Everything that's written in the job description I have done. But you have absolutely no idea about what happened in the other interviews. Maybe if you actually saw those interviews, you'll realize that you would have made the same decision that the interviewer did. So it's very, very difficult to not take it personally. It is bound to happen. It's human. But at least being conscious of the fact helps you recover faster and focus on the next task very quickly. And lastly, the recruiter, like me being someone whose job is to hire all the people that we want for our company, a recruiter doesn't want anything more than closing a position and finding the right candidate. So if the person hasn't reached out to you, or probably you haven't heard back from the person, after a while, just assume that it's not going to happen, or they put the position on hold or whatever, or they will reach out to you if they need you and if you are the right fit. So have that faith and just move on from all the negative feelings that comes after giving a lot of interviews. And that's the last note. So we've covered everything on the agenda, and that's it from us.
Fabulous. That was a great session. Thank you so much, Akshat and Suchitra. I think that was very comprehensive. It's not just the practical resources and tips that you guys gave. It was great, all of that. But I personally appreciated you spending time on the mindset and the behavioral aspects of the interview. Oftentimes we all get so hung up on polishing our technical knowledge and the concepts that we forget about these behavioral aspects, and then it's sort of a googly when we go into the interview setting and they ask you a question and now you're completely unprepared. So really appreciate that. And I also really connected with the fact that it's a two-way street, right? So again, we're always hung up trying to impress the interviewer and trying to, show that you're the best candidate, that we often forget to evaluate the company for ourselves if it even, is a good fit for us. So again, fantastic stuff there. And I know it's a lot to digest for all of you. So don't worry, we're recording the session and it will be parked on the ICT YouTube channel. So whenever, it's your time and you have to prepare for the interviews starting from now, because there's a lot that you can already start preparing. You can always go to the YouTube channel of ICT and check out this particular session. It's recorded and it will be parked there. So what I'll do is I will stop. Akshat, I guess you're sharing the screen, so I will.
Sorry.
No problem. So I will go ahead and start sharing my screen. Again, everybody, you can post your questions at Pigeonhole. All you need to do, once my screen shows up, is go to www.pigeonhole.at and enter the passcode 15May21. I hope my screen is visible. And then, yeah, and your question will be posted there. I can already see several other questions posted, and we will try to get to those questions now. We have about 10 minutes remaining for the actual workshop, but I say, if you guys have time, please hang on. We'll try to address as many questions as possible. But as I said, if you have to drop off, that's fine. The session will be recorded and posted on YouTube, including the Q&A session. So you can always go and check out the this particular section later if you have to drop off. And I appreciate all of your availability for the next few minutes. All right, so there are quite a few questions and quite a few upvoted questions. So maybe we'll just go with the most popular question. I think this is quite a challenging question. I agree with this question. I might have myself upvoted. So how do you answer the tell me about yourself? So maybe if one of you wants to start addressing that.
Suchitra, do you have a preference? You're on mute. Okay, maybe I'll take that quickly. So the way I approach this question is I actually referred to my resume first, very quickly, and there are some highlights that you really want to mention in your resume to create a good first impression. Because remember, this is going to be the first question that the interviewer asks you, and you want to create that good first impression, right? So you can very quickly talk about, give your name. Hi, I'm Akshat, and I've done my undergrad from ICT, and that's it. Don't go into too much detail about that. Jump to the relevant points, right? That, over my coursework at ICT, I've gained a lot of experience. I've done an internship at ONGC, and I mean, that's what I had done. So that's what I would tell people, right? And keep it short. It does not have to be 1 minute long. 20 seconds, max 30 seconds is fine. But I would strongly recommend write it down beforehand. Just expect this question is going to be there in every interview you do. Write it down. And also, depending on what company you're interviewing for, what role you're interviewing for, there may be some things which are more relevant than others. So you probably want to include those facts rather than the other things that you've mentioned in your resume.
Yeah, agreed. Suchitra, any additional tips?
Yeah, just agree with that. But one thing is that sometimes people just talk about what's already in the resume and stop at that. So I would like to say that keep something ready in your back pocket about something else that you would like to say, because that's why they are asking the question. Of course, the resume is already there with them. And generally, from my own personal experience, the person is actually saying, we know all of this, we have worked here, but who are you? Like, keeping this aside, like, who are you? What are you passionate about? Or what are your hobbies, etc. So have a story, not like a really long story, but have a concise, brief story that can sound interesting to a third person, ready about you. And I'm sure not even here, even in social situations, it's useful to have something like that handy. So prepare that, maybe run it with your friends, or best way is ask your friends that if someone asks you about me, what will you say? Or what will be the first three adjectives that come to your mind when you describe me? And maybe that will give you some insights and some help you on the self-awareness that you need to answer this question.
Absolutely. Great. The next question, Sakshi asked, what if we don't have a real example related to the question asked? what would you guys do in such a situation?
Okay, I think I'll start with that one, then Akshat can add. So usually the questions are based on something what you have already put in your resume or something that you have said you already have in your experience. If it's not about your work experience, say if you've said in ICT you are in the student council, or if you are an editor of the magazine or something like that, the question can be around that. Most of the time they are broad questions. They are not very specific. It can be something like, tell us about a time when you resolved a conflict, or tell us about a time when a group is working on something, but you did not agree with the other people who are working on the same project, and how did you handle it? So try to have these examples, or try to think of these scenarios. It can be from your second year project and you are already in your final year or something. So keep these examples, or think of these examples and keep them handy. But if you absolutely don't have any example, maybe you can also start the answer by saying that you don't have an actual example. But if you come across a situation like this in the future, what would your approach be in that situation? So that's the last backup plan if you don't really have an example. And then you can still go about answering the question as per what you think and what genuinely would be your approach to a situation like that. I hope that helps. But Akshay, do you want to add anything?
Suchitra, I completely agree. I was going to add the point that you added at the end, that there may be a time when you actually don't have an example to offer. And at that point, it's your presence of mind and how you think on the spot also that helps. So make sure you think, you give it some thought, that what would I have done if this actually happened, right? And then you can say that. So completely agree.
Fabulous. All right. Another dreaded question. How do you tell the HR your weakness? And is this even, usually asked? I personally have not been asked this question in my interviews, but just wanted to get, your thoughts, Suchitra. Maybe is this a question that people should anticipate? And if so, what is the right way to go about it?
Yeah. Even I have personally not come across this question as a candidate, but even as interviewers or as recruiters, this is something I understand why this question is being asked, right? Because it is something cliched and something that has been always there for years. That even as a student, I heard a lot about that. This is something people ask. Tell us about your strengths and weaknesses. So completely understand. And it's also possible that not this question, but something to this effect in a different form or a different question can be asked to you. So I think all that the recruiter or the interviewer is trying to gather is how self-aware you are. This doesn't mean you absolutely, criticize yourself in front of that person saying, oh, I'm always late to office. Last time this happened, share an example of a big blunder that you have actually happened in your previous. That doesn't mean you offer something on a plate to them that might actually work against your candidature. That might something that they are not even looking for. Sometimes some candidates give me answers where I'm like, I did not need to know that at all, but then now I know it, and that makes me think. So that's not what they're looking for, but what generally we want to know is how self-aware you are. It can be something like, even Akshat while talking in this slide about being clear and concise, if this is something I struggle with. It also you can talk about that and say that I'm doing XYZ to work on it. So that kind of shows, okay, first of all, you're aware of something, excellent. And second of all, you're even doing something to go with it. Another example can be some people's natural working style. Right? So everybody has a different working style, and sometimes it works in some situations, sometimes it doesn't. So for me, for example, in my current company, it's a very, very fast culture. We're moving really, really fast all the time, very quick deliverables. And that's against my natural style of work. I want to be thorough. I want to do a lot of research. I want to talk to 10 people about some idea before implementing it. But here we need execution to be super fast. So it's a conscious effort on my end that I align with it. And I tell myself that you don't have to have a PhD in this topic to be able to do this. 10% is good enough for the results that we want. So this is enough, right? So that is again something which is not necessarily a weakness, but it is about aligning to the kind of work that's needed. And it doesn't have to be about the company itself. It can be about you need X skills in this project and you need Y skills in that project, but you have to handle all of it. So how do you do that? Right? So it doesn't, like I said, don't throw yourself under the bus by giving some example that will absolutely work against you, but share some things about your work style, share some things about your communication. Maybe on the technical aspect, you can say, this is very important to work in your company. If it's a chemical company aligned to a certain manufacturing system or something. And I hope to gain more knowledge about that because that hasn't been my core area of study or something. So try to make it a story that sounds like a progressive story. It is something XYZ that's relevant to them and you are aware of it and you're doing something about it. So that can be a best practice to tackle this question.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Akshat, any additional thoughts or personal examples?
Yeah, so I think Suchitra, what you brought up about self-awareness is very important. Even when we are interviewing candidates, over the last few weeks, we looked at people's self-awareness. So I would recommend everyone on this call to go and search this. What is self-awareness, right? Maybe it's not, it's deeper than we think it is. So look it up, right? And coming to some examples, right? When I was asked this question, or I don't even remember if I was asked this question or not, but the way I prepared for it is, I don't want to tell something which is going to destroy my chances at the company. I don't even want to be pretentious and say something that, oh, I work too hard and that's a weakness. What is that, right? So people are going to see through all that, right? So you have to be somewhere in the middle where it's not too bad, not too pretentious. So I said things like, I prefer to work alone sometimes, and that can be, I like to solve a problem on my own sometimes, and that can be a problem because I don't reach out to other people, right? So I'm working on that. And then, as Suchitra said, keep it a progressive story. I'm working on this. This is an opportunity for me to improve. So always phrase it in the positive way.
Absolutely. I hope that answered everybody's question. Again, I think we are at the end of our scheduled time, but I may just go ahead and take a couple more questions. So if you have to drop off, don't worry. We'll be recording the session and you can check this part out later. All right. So another question is, I'm from a small town where we don't have many opportunities as compared to the students from the same background. So how can we develop ourselves? I guess they want to ask if, what are some resources for them so that they feel that they're equally competent to people with more resources. Any thoughts?
Okay, I'll go first, Akshat. So in terms of resources, I believe the question is centered around preparing yourselves for the interview. So one thing, even while preparing for this and trying to summarize everything in a 1-hour seminar, was that everything was online. For every single slide that we put on here, there is at least 10 or different websites with a lot of content around it, which we had a lot of trouble shrinking it and even obviously sharing from our own experiences. So, and this is something I really like about the internet and globalization, that now it's a level playing field where everything is available. Thankfully, in India, we have really good internet connectivity everywhere. So I would say that's definitely something you should leverage. If we are talking about actual opportunities of when we say practice a lot of interviews, etc., then like I mentioned, create the opportunities to yourself by doing mock interviews, reaching out to some seniors, saying, if I have an interview or I might have an interview in the future, but I would like to brush up my skills, or of simply talking to someone one-on-one and being able to confidently give answers. You can reach out to your friends, your family, or your seniors. There are also a lot of, I see on LinkedIn, there's this increasing trend that a lot of leaders are also posting that every Saturday, I'm dedicating 2 hours to whoever wants their CV reviewed or wants to do a mock interview. So maybe that's something you should look out for as well. or even like Akshat mentioned, reach out to people, and 1 of 10 people at least should reply to create that opportunity. That's all from me. Anything?
I completely agree. I don't have much to add on this. Suchitra, you pretty much covered everything.
Absolutely. Yes, I think internet's definitely made everything level. So please do utilize that as a resource. Maybe this might be the last question, and then we'll wrap up the Q&A. So any thoughts on how to answer, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Akshat, you want to take a stab maybe, and then?
Yeah, I mean, I myself need to think about this, because I am not sure where I see myself in 5 years. So I can see how challenging this question is. But again, I think I'll keep going back to just thinking about yourself and what you want and your ambitions. This may sound again very cliched and very repetitive that I'm saying this, but there may be something you really want to contribute to. Like, for example, I want to do something about the environment, for example, right? So I'm going to include that in my 5-year plan, that it's a long-term development item for me to do something related to sustainability and conservation of the environment. And then in my short-term development items, I have a few other things, like maybe rising up in the job I am at currently, or moving more laterally in my job, exploring other opportunities in my current field, or going for a master's, going for grad school, something like that. But list it out, break it down. If it's easy, break it down into short-term development items, long-term development items, right? 5 years is definitely long-term, but to build up and get there, you have to complete some short milestones. So that's how I would structure it.
Yeah, I think that absolutely makes sense, because then definitely the long term, basically showing a point and then creating a story around that point or leading to that point is really, really helpful. But in general, what I would also add is that there's no harm in not giving a definitive answer, but sharing your thought process about the answer. Your answer can totally be that, I think about this, but at the same time, then I think, okay, what about this, right? And this is happening in this industry, or that is happening, that is equally interesting to me. So I'm probably struggling between this and that. And maybe the answer to that solution will be when I know something else, right? So it can be completely a thought process where you can give that answer and say, what do you think, right, about this? Do you have any suggestions about what I have to say, or anything that might help me in my thought process and be a bit more sure about what I'm. So it can completely be that, as long as it shows that you've given it a thought, and which is actually really good. What Akshat said, it's something you should ask yourself every once in a while, because you get so your daily tasks and your daily 9 to 5 job and weekdays, weekend cycle can go on, and then you would land somewhere. So everybody should ask themselves this question once in a while, and that actually shows that, okay, you're not just going wherever it is taking you, but you have some purpose to what your actions that you're taking every day.
Yeah, and let's be honest, it's a fast changing world. What you are in the next year may be totally different. So to keep up with that fast changing world, it's almost unreasonable to have this question.
Yeah. That can be your answer as well.
That's my answer. That's going to be my answer. I'm going to impress everyone.
Fabulous. Okay. So I want to be considerate of everybody's time. So what we'll do is we'll stop the official Q&A session here. If you still have questions, please hang back, and we'll give you the permission to unmute yourself, and then you can still ask your question after that. And I hope Akshat and Suchitra won't mind staying back for a couple minutes extra to get all of those burning questions answered. So again, I just wanted to, before wrapping up, give a quick preview of what's coming up, our upcoming session. So we'll be back again on the 22nd of May for a session, for a career guidance session in our Inspire series. And this will be led by Rohit Rao and Kiran Iyer, who are ICT alumni pursuing very exciting careers in the field of computational science and research. So if this is something that you're thinking about or want to know more about, come join us. It'll be a very interesting talk. And then after that, we will have a panel session on getting your MBA, and this is scheduled for the 5th of June. And this will be part of our Achieve series. Again, here we have a very diverse set of panelists whose MBA journeys are quite different and complementary to one another. So some got their degrees in India, some abroad. They've gone on to do very different jobs after their MBA. So, if this is a career route that you're thinking of, if you want to get an MBA and you have questions, I'm sure most of the questions will get answered at this session. So be on the lookout for the announcements regarding these sessions, and please do register for them when you get a chance. And we really look forward to seeing you there. So that concludes our session for today. Firstly, again, I just want to thank Akshat and Suchitra for their time today and for this wonderful and comprehensive session. Really a huge thank you. We really appreciate it, both of you. I also want to thank our volunteers at the Spark Mentoring team and the ICT social media team. Fabulous job, guys. Always appreciate your continued support and all the work that you do behind the scenes to make these sessions so seamless and make these sessions happen in the first place. So thank you so much. And lastly, thank you all for joining us today. We hope you found the session useful. And if you did, please do leave your feedback for this session. We love to see how we are doing and what we can do to make these sessions even better. You'll also get get the link for the feedback on your email. So if you want to, again, rewatch this whole session, it'll be packed on the YouTube channel of ICT, and then you can give us your feedback. You can go to our website and check out more information about all the different programs that are going to come your way. And if you have any questions, thoughts, suggestions, definitely write to us at info.sparkmentoring@gmail.com. And if you like these sessions, if you think more people will benefit from these sessions, your friends, your colleagues, please do spread the word. We are building and having a more comprehensive set of sessions, and we hope it will be helpful to all of you guys. So that concludes our session for today. Again, thank you so much for joining and spending some extra time with us today. It's always great to see so many people enthusiastically participating. And you may exit the session now. And if you have any additional